Hello, hello. Welcome back to my reaction series for Arcane. Today we're going to be doing episode 6 to follow up the amazing episode 5, probably the best episode. I don't know what just flew by the screen. Probably the best episode in the series up until this point. It was just amazing, beautifully presented, great character work, great progression of the plot and story. It was awesome. And hopefully episode 6 has more of the same. The one thing I wanted to do right here was a little bit of a character ranking, because 5 episodes in of a 9 episode series, just a bit over halfway done, I feel like it's a good idea to do a top 5 characters in the series just to see where I'm at this point, and maybe compare and contrast end of the series to now. Might be cool, but just doing it for fun, I guess. I'm gonna mainly just give the ranking and not explain it too much, just a tiny blurb on each character, because I've been talking for hours at this point about the series. You know how I feel about each of the characters and what I think about them, so that should speak for itself, but I'm just summing it up here. So number 5 would be Victor. I think he's an extremely likable character, but with a tinge of sort of recklessness to it. I think the way that he compares and contrasts with Jace is really good, while being a bit more sympathetic thanks to what we get post time skip. It adds a tragic lens to him, and I really wonder what that will lead to. Will that make him be a bit more reckless? Actually, we already know it's making him a bit more reckless. He's doing all these experiments that he wouldn't have if his health weren't in danger. And I think that could lead to some advancement, but also some danger. I mentioned Jace in the beginning of the series as a representation of the difference between the duality of discovery. But I think that by the end of it, Victor might end up portraying that a bit more strongly than Jace, who seems to be getting caught up in this golden boy era of his, where he's got all this fame and he's celebrated by the masses, and he's starting to drift just a little bit. Maybe. We'll see where it goes. Either way, Victor's a great character, beautifully voice acted, really well presented, really sympathetic, while at the same time merging with the setting and plot really well. I hope to see more of him. I hope he develops further and he could climb up these rankings, I think, in no time. So number 4 would be Vi. I think Vi is really substantial. I think her motivations have been there since episode 1. She was the most strongly presented in the beginning, and that hasn't changed until now. She's a central figure in the story, and she continues to be significant and contributory. Vi's great. She's my number 4, and I probably won't stop calling her Violet on occasion. Sorry, something with my brain. So my top 3 are extremely difficult to rank, but I think I got it at this point. Number 3 would be Jinx, or Powder. Powder, I thought, was a really nice character. She was fine. She played a role. She seemed to have set a foundation for a proper coming-of-age sort of thing in the beginning. But the end of episode, sort of the mid of episode 3 to episode 5, she's developed in so many unique and interesting ways. The way this trauma has molded her mind to act in this way, the way she looks upon her past and her guilt and regrets and can't get it out of her mind, and the way that she's being coaxed by my number 2 on this list to embrace this new self, and the way she thinks about that, and all these different dimensions to her character and her psychology. She's just shot right up, and she is very, very close with my number 1 and 2. I can see her being number 1 by the end as we continue to examine her psychology and mindset, and as we continue to internalize on the way she feels about these sorts of things, and as she tries to navigate through this world that she's just so fragmented and broken by. I think Jinx is a great character. Starting from that scene in episode 3 where she just completely loses it after being told by Vi that she wasn't ready for the mission to save Vander, ever since then it's just been strength to strength for the character. Number 2 on this list would be her partner in crime, Silco. From his introduction, he had this super menacing aura, he had such a presence, amazing voice work, great character design, just this ominous presence looming in the shadows of Zon. The way he looks upon the things that happened to his people, the war, the dynamics with Piltover, it's so understandable and in ways sympathetic and rich. You can see why Vander thinks the way he does, and you can see the way why Vi thinks the way she does. and other people in Zon, in the Undercity. You can see why Victor started thinking the way he does, having been born there and growing up there. Growing up in a place like that can lead to a bunch of different directions that people can diverge into, depending on who they are, what their experiences are, what they value, etc. And Silco just happened to resent it, completely resent the opportunities it didn't give to him and his people, the respect that they weren't given that they deserved. And this made him take this hugely dark turn, this violent turn. And it was exacerbated when Vander turned on him and didn't allow him to continue this war. But there's two things aside from that make Silco really interesting for me. First is his conviction. He is just so dead set on this, and the line that sticks out to me the most is the contrast between the two things he felt while drowning. One side, there's the comfort, the safe option, the water lulling you in, metaphorical for how some people view the Piltover Zahn situation, as he sort of mentions. And then on the other side, there's survival instinct, rage, anger, all of these things that fester through the ages as you build up this burning desire to just be able to live, and how that can result into a reaction. That's what he is. He's the reaction of this oppression. He's the type of thing this can bring about. And the way he thanks Vander for helping him realize his conviction. He thanks the brother that literally tried to drown him. The brother that he grew up with and loved, he thanks him for this betrayal because of how it helped him be enlightened. That strikes really deep. He's been great from the first episode, and he continues to be great. And the second reason why I really like him is because of how complex and dynamic his relationship with Jinx is, how he sees himself in her, how this whole thing adds a layer of emotion to him that wasn't there before. The emotions associated with him before are sympathetic because of his situation and being able to see why he feels the way he does, while not condoning his actions, of course. But the emotions added to him and the layers added to him through his dynamic with Jinx, it puts him in the light of a character who is capable of caring. He was capable of caring before for people like Vander, but you might have assumed that life and war and all this devastation just sucked that out of him. But no. He sees someone in Powder, who then becomes Jinx, who is just like him, and he feels immense sympathy for her. And he sees himself in her and wants her to succeed because of that, but he also just wants her to succeed because I think he cares for her. I think he wants her to be comfortable, and I think he wants her to live a life that she can be proud of without this trauma. And yeah, all these dimensions just make him such a great character. And so my number one, which may not surprise you if you've been following my discussions and reactions, is Jace Tallis, the man who formed his life around a dream, fixated on this huge idealistic wonder that saved him and his mother, the concept of magic, who saw so much beauty in it and focused his entire life on research that would harness it properly, that would benefit people in the way it benefited him. I think there's such conflicting feelings about him in a really great way, because on one hand you just have this boy and this dream for a better world, and he just keeps going into that direction. But on the other hand, being able to enact the influence he wants to make this dream possible means having to do some less savory things, some more political posturing, some more unofficial, less than legal things. To do what he wants to do, it's not as simple as just doing the research and executing it and doing what you think is right, because things just don't work out that way in a world as complex as this, in a society like this that's so multidimensional. Just going on the straight and narrow is not going to lead to productive results. And so he has to do these things, but in the process of doing it, he slowly loses himself. And yet, at this point, at the end of episode 5, he is still very far from losing himself, despite you seeing that trajectory. I don't know if he will at this point. It's very much up in the air, because he keeps going back to the people he cares about. And though he's not, once in a while, because of the things he's gone through and the person he's become, he gets a bit haughty, a bit snobby. He can say some things that are a bit short-sighted, and not very thoughtful, not very tactful. At the same time, he still very much cares for the people that he cared for all the way back when. Victor, he cares for so much. Caitlin, at the beginning of episode 4, or at the end of episode 4, he reaches out to her. She doesn't take it, but he still does it. He still cares. He doesn't forget himself. He doesn't forget the person he is. And that is why the potential of a corruption arc is so devastating. Because he's so well characterized, he's so rich. You can see every dimension to him very clearly. He's just a great demonstrator of so many different themes, from the discovery thing I mentioned to the slippery slope of power, of wanting to enact this change, how difficult it can be to achieve your dreams in a world like this. All these sorts of things. Jace puts all that in the forefront of the story. I think he's super interesting. I can't wait to see where his story goes. At this point, it's totally up in the air. Will he become corrupted? Will he continue to be manipulated and play into potentially Medarda's hands? Am I completely wrong about that? I don't know. Will he, in the end, go back to himself, go back to his prior inclinations, and completely side with Victor? I think at this point I get the vibe that he's done with Caitlin. Their relationship is done. They've gone their separate ways, which is sad. So I don't think he's going to go back and revert back to being on her side 100%, but we'll see. The point is, I have no idea which way his character will go in. Corruption, or back to the person he once was, or in between. All three of those are possible, and all three of those are very much in character, and that's why he's so interesting. But yeah, he's my number one. I don't imagine that he's a very popular number one. He doesn't seem to me to be the type of character that would be widely acclaimed, that tons of people would like the things he does, the role he has. And I think that's understandable. I've always been someone to sort of like those lesser loved sorts of characters, so I think it's fairly in line with my tastes that he's my number one at this point. Regardless, he's great. I think if I had to guess, Silco, Jinx, and Vi would be the most popular characters at this point in the story. Not sure, though. And a few honorable mentions. I guess I might as well just list off most of the secondary cast, because every character in this story plays a role. Every character's good. They contribute in some way. So Heimerdinger, amazing contrast to Jace. Great representation of tradition, of caution, of the flip cautionary side of discovery, yet still being possessed by that scientific mind, that spirit. And I love that dualism to him. He's super interesting. Vander plays his role really well, had some amazingly badass moments at the end of episode 3 where he defended Violet. Super admirable that when having to decide between hatred and revenge, or the people he loves in Vi, represented by Vi, even under the influence of Shimmer, which brings out the monster in you, brings out your base instincts, he 100% went with his heart and chose love. That just speaks volumes of the man. I think he was a terrific talisman spearhead of the Undercity, while at the same time not being perfect. He was not all-wise, he was not all-knowing. His method, while clever and intelligent and cautionary and best for the people that he loved, was not perfect, because who's to argue that the right way to go about this is not striking back? If you're in this position, you can't blame anyone who wants to. His philosophy is not the perfect philosophy for the Undercity, for all parties. There is tons of people defecting. There are different factions because they don't all agree with him. And I'm glad that the story doesn't portray him as this wise, despite him having his heart in the right place and him probably having the most balanced view of the situation, the story was very clear to show that there was no answer to this. He didn't have the answer. He had a answer. It was a good answer, but it wasn't the only one. It wasn't the one that was right for everyone. People didn't view his philosophy as a way to live life. Even Vi wasn't 100% happy with this. His foster daughter, one of the people he loves the most in this world, one of the people who loves him the most in this world, didn't view this as the most productive way to go about things. And so I think that Vander just plays a great role. He's a great early story character. He had to die for the story to go this direction, but he played his role really well. Then we have Caitlyn. Not too much to say about her, apart from what I said in the last reaction, but very minor in the first 3 episodes, but eventually grows into a more prominent character in the second act. This person who is so fixated on her idea of justice, willing to do whatever she can, willing to cut through all of the falsities of this society, of the aristocracy. And I find that really refreshing. Great contrast to Jace, who cannot find it within himself because of his dream, because of his goal. He can't find an avenue where he can avoid this sort of thing. He has to play the game. But Caitlyn, in contrast, sees her goal, goes for it, screw the bullshit. Who cares about any of that? And that's very refreshing. There are a lot of people who play politics here, and she doesn't care about that. Then we have Medarda, Counselor Medarda, Mel Medarda, the devil on Jace's shoulder. The seemingly manipulator-ish character. Another one I can't put my finger on. I don't know what her eventual goals are. I get the feeling she's being mostly manipulative, but I do think there's a good chance she cares for Jace as well. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I wonder where she's going to go from here, but she's been super crafty, a great demonstrator of higher politics in this setting, a great demonstrator of the silliness of these customs that have to go on at the top for things to function, while being super intelligent of the world and how it's formed, how it behaves. And teaching Jace about this. I don't know what her ultimate motive is, but just like Jace, I don't think anything's out of character. There's been plenty of substance for interpretations for her genuinely caring about Jace, not caring at all and doing this purely for her own gain, and a mix of it being for her own gain and caring for Jace. I think there is ultimately some element of her own gain to this no matter what, but yeah, the specifics are unknown to me, and she keeps me guessing all the time, always entertaining. I'm always hanging on to her every word. She's a great character. Then we have Marcus, who has got himself stuck in between these situations. Much more of a minor character, but I think that the way he contrasts with Caitlyn and her path, and the way he is just stuck between a rock and a hard place at this point in time, it's a great indirect insight to the politics of Zahn, Silco, and his operations. Very natural way to exposit that. It also tells us a bit about the politics in Piltover, and going in between those two situations is really great for the story, just to see how things are interacting and things are developing from that sort of standpoint. But also, he's very human. He doesn't just play this tool, this role of a tool in the story. He is so conflicted. He has gotten to this point where he has this power, but he can't do the things he truly wants because he's just stuck. He's just stuck. I find his fixation on trying to be the man he wants to be, trying to be the man that his daughter would be proud of, and his inability to do that, so very human. So he plays a great function, and he's very human and very well characterized too. Marcus is really interesting. And someone I haven't mentioned is Echo. He wasn't a very important character in Act 1, but he was notable. He was part of this little crew. He was more important, it seems, than Milo and Clagger, quite a bit less important than Vi and Powder. And we have not seen him post-time skip. So clearly we're going to see him eventually. Very interested to see what happens, where he's at, what he's doing. There's no way they just introduced him and killed him off without him having much of a role. No way. So, we'll see. Oh, and then Grayson. Really well characterized, recontextualized through episode 5. Very functional, very good minor character. I liked her a lot. And so, yeah, that's about it. I hope I didn't forget any character. If I did, I might discuss it in post or comment about it in a pinned comment. Sorry for the huge preamble. I just wanted to get my thoughts out there at this midway point of the series about what I think about each character, because I find doing that sort of thing to be fun, pretty interesting to compare and contrast. Hopefully you enjoyed it too. Because this was so long, I'm going to put a timestamp in the beginning of this of the reaction, saying to skip to this point to get to the reaction, because this is a huge intro. But yeah, anyways, let's get into episode 6. Enough talking. I just realized this sweater's going to be out of season by the time this video goes up. Oh well. Victor. Childhood Victor. Oh, this is great. Oh, that shot drives home his isolation a lot. I'm already seeing a metaphor here. Unable to keep up with his passion. His vision exceeds his capabilities. Maybe? I hope that doesn't end up being the case.
Don't be afraid. Why aren't you playing with the others?
Silco's man.
Loneliness is often the byproduct of a gifted mind.
What is it?
This is Rio. She's a rare mutation that I cultivated. She's dying. I'm attempting to prevent that. The mutation must survive. We can be loners together.
This partnership that we had no idea even existed. Two separate characters. That's really interesting. Back to present day.
Good to see some things haven't changed. I heard your prognosis. I'm terribly sorry, my boy.
Do you contemplate death, Professor?
Only that of friends.
I suppose your legacy has been well secured.
You should be proud of what you've accomplished, Victor.
Heimerdinger's a great character.
Figments. My contributions will be short-lived, even in your memory.
It's a sad truth that those who shine brightest often burn fastest.
That's an amazing shot, by the way. Great intro. The visual direction for that scene with Victor chasing the boat contraption he made, super good. Recontextualization for this doctor-scientist character, a hint at the dark side of Discovery. He's very obsessed with his legacy, now that death is so imminent to him. Victor, I mean.
I didn't know you were an artist.
There's quite a lot about me you don't know.
Listen, I'm sorry for disappearing last night.
Duty calls.
That intonation alone shows me she cares for him at least a little bit.
Solving real issues, not just trade disputes. Victor saved my life once.
The world isn't
Now
that
he
simple.
needs me, and there's nothing I can do.
I didn't realize he was so close.
He's like my brother.
Why did you come to me with this?
Nothing feels impossible when I'm with you.
Wow.
I'm in exile from my family.
What? Why?
I fell short of Madada's standards. You should be with him, Chase. We don't have to face it alone.
Wow.
It's a beautiful
This is-
painting.
This is beautiful. Side to Medarda we hadn't seen before. And the contrast. Oh boy. What's he gonna do now that he's been confronted by this horrible reality?
Jack!
Oh. I thought this was a vision that Victor was having for a second.
My name's Theorem.
Okay.
Nice try, Chuck.
Boss wants us to grab someone up.
Who you grabbing?
Some girls. They got in a fight with Zavika. Did a number on her.
Oh, really?
Vi
Which number?
and Caitlin. Every scene gives me excitement because every single character is so interesting and I can't wait to see them progress. Oh yeah. She was stabbed.
Silco's goons aren't far behind. We have to keep moving.
Parallel of when they were going down into the Undercity. Firelights! We haven't seen them in a while. Ooh. She's kind of raw.
It's your sister. She's back. She's looking for you. She's with some girl enforcer. Guess she replaced you.
You're lying!
It's only a matter of time before you implode, and Silco finally gets the message that you're about as good for our cause as you were for your family.
He's not gonna get that
Jeez.
message, I don't think. no matter what happens. Marcus. Another interesting character. What's he doing?
About time Daddy joined us.
Oh, that is twisted. Oh my god.
You remember our old friend Vi, don't you? Vander's daughter?
This is so messed up.
She was about your age, and Daddy here assured me that she left with him. But it seems she never made it. Could you imagine being separated from your father?
She's in a safe place.
This isn't a thinly veiled threat at all.
She's in the lane. There's an enforcer with her. A girl, roughly the same age.
Oh, Marcus.
She's a Kiraman. I'll track her down. I can fix this.
They cannot be allowed to resurface. Do we understand each other?
Now, is that because of what it would do to Jinx? I think that's more of a factor in his mind than them being a threat to his business ventures. Silco's a twisted man.
Oh, so sorry. Accidents happen.
That wasn't very subtle at all, my dude.
It responds to organic matter.
Oh.
Incredible.
Life, growth,
This is unlike anything we've ever seen. Augmenting physiology,
extending life,
curing you.
curing, yeah. But what did Heimerdinger warn them
It's happened
about?
to everyone.
I don't know.
I can't determine. They're rejecting the transmutation.
The mutation. What is it that the guy said?
We'll solve this. There may not be time. I can feel my body eroding.
Jace is still on his side, though. This is terrifying. What is going on?
What is this place? It's where the kind of people you topsiders don't want to think about wind up.
Oh, that's horrifying. This episode is extremely heavy.
I know you have your reservations about me. This only works if we can trust each other. I suppose Topside is to blame for all your misfortunes.
Not all of them.
Great direction.
I shouldn't have left you.
You have a good heart.
You've got a good heart.
Don't ever let this place break you.
What is that?
I'm calling it the Hex Core. Hextech that evolves.
That sounds a bit
It's
reckless.
groundbreaking.
Bringing up memories.
You must destroy it.
What?
I've seen nations destroyed by a single seed, and
But
it
that
looked
means giving up Victor's life.
exactly like this. It must be destroyed.
Wait, no, I won't let you.
Jace, this is a violation of the ethos.
This is gonna happen
I will have it
eventually.
destroyed one way or another.
That's your opinion. We'll see if the council agrees.
Heimerdinger is being more and more pushed to the outside.
Is she all right? Wait. Easy. That's Vi, right? I'm a friend.
Yeah, he was in episode
Or
1.
At least.
What happened?
I'm sorry. Come with me.
Ailment.
She's been stabbed.
I'm assuming this is Shimmer withdrawal. Yeah.
Shimmer, why would you take something that does that to you?
I just wanted to feel what it was like to be somebody, to make other people afraid.
How enticing must that be for people who have been living oppressed their entire life to just feel powerful, to feel in control for once? And this is what it leads to. How cruel.
Let's go. I think Vi will be happy to see a friendly face.
No, you go ahead. Anyway, I don't want her to see me like this.
So rough.
Just, okay?
I found this on one of the firelights.
Uh,
It matches fragments we found outside your lab and at the Hex Gates. Believe they're
he had to
planning
go
more
through with it.
attacks.
He threatened his daughter.
Well, how has this threat gone unnoticed for so long? For now, we need to prevent any further attacks.
Short of searching everyone who crosses the bridges, I don't know how we can.
Then that's what we'll do. We have to protect the city.
I think he's abandoned caution at this point. He's putting an iron grip on the borders.
Counselors, we have lost our way. Loosened our morals in favor of comfort and convenience. Traded honor for prestige. If we set aside our greed and arrogance, we can be one again. We must hold each other accountable.
And who holds you accountable?
What?
Shimmer is rampant.
Jace, you forget yourself.
I'm sorry, Professor, but healing this city will take more than just speeches. Time and again, you've warned us what not to do. But let me ask you this. What's your plan? Humans don't live for centuries.
Victor.
We can't wait for progress.
Victor.
We need
It's all that he's thinking
focused
about.
on the future. You are the true father of Piltover, and your years of service can never be repaid. I believe it's time we gave the beloved founder of our city a well-deserved retirement.
Jace.
This is happening quicker than I thought it would. And they're all in his pocket.
All in favor?
It's gonna happen. But, oh. That look. She's the first, of course. She's been planting these seeds for a while, but... Oh man, this is sad. There's a ton of reluctance. And he's the last one, even though he initiated it. I got chills at that. That is sobering.
Easy, easy, easy.
A little bit of a moment. Oh.
Who's Powder?
My sister. I thought she died, but no. I have to try and find her.
You don't have parents?
No. They were killed by enforcers.
Deeply rooted, this hatred of enforcers. It's not easy to just abandon it. Oh, Silco, man. Oh, the music. They've shown so many
What have you done
sides
with
to
my
him.
sister?
This episode is showing his darkest side.
But Jinx. Oh, she is more than I ever imagined.
I'm gonna find her and erase whatever fucked up delusions you put in her head. But first, I'm gonna bring your bullshit empire down all around you.
What a moment. She see it? She saw it. This is spectacular. Oh my god. Marcus takes a stand. What a sequence. I couldn't say a word. First time in this series that I've teared up, and we're back to the past.
Rio will live.
You did this?
I thought you understood. The mutation must survive.
Horrible. So that's why they parted ways? He had disagreements with his ideas of progression. That's the person he was talking about.
I understand now.
And he's all burnt from the explosion in episode 3. Oh, what? She's still waiting there.
Powder?
no idea how she's gonna react.
Vi? Oh, Powder! Promise I
Sokka
did
wasn't
what
able to kill Powder
got
in the
arrested.
river
Marcus.
in that
I don't know.
baptism.
Are you real? Yes, of course. Things changed when you left. I changed. You did what you had to do to survive. What matters is we're together.
No judgment. Oh.
Who's she?
Oh no.
Your sister is Jinx.
Ooh boy.
Caitlin, just listen. We can work this out.
This is a trick. You're playing me.
Powder, it's okay.
Just hearing their
Stop
voices.
calling me that. It's Jinx now. Powder fell down a well.
You're not a jinx. You can fire that thing if you want, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to abandon you again.
Why are they here? There's no huge smuggling operation they're trying to disrupt or anything. The use of color is amazing. Seeing what her sisters become. That was incredible. What an amazing episode. What an amazing episode. It had this from start to finish, even though there were fireworks, particularly at the end there, it had this amazing, somber, sad lament of a tone. It was like the whole episode was a sad, just like I said, like a lamentation of the situation at this point. Everything's weighty, everything's melancholic. Nothing is there's no happiness here. This is it's crushing. And I think it's pretty clear who the leader of the Firelights is now. Who's the one character that hasn't shown up post time skip. We'll talk about it. So I really enjoyed Act 1, the first 3 episodes of Arcane, pre-time skip. The first episode is undoubtedly the weakest, I think, in the series, but it was enjoyable. The second expanded the world beautifully, and the third was this huge dramatic crescendo that offered so much intrigue for the future, and a great conclusion for Vander. It was just a really good prologue arc. Having said that, Act 2, which I've been told is episodes 4, 5, and 6, since it started, it's been an amazing step up in depth, breadth, expanding everything, progressing characterization, adding emotions, recontextualizing things through backstories. It's been super good. It just keeps one-upping itself, and this episode in particular was insane. Top 2 for sure. Maybe my favorite, I'm not sure. Whereas episode 5 kind of provided its identity through its visuals, the very dynamic and artistic flow to things. This one did it through tone, I think. Not to say that the visuals weren't spectacular, because of course they were, but this one did it through this entrancing, sobering tone, this sad lament from the very beginning until the very end. It just didn't relent. Every scene was weighty, every single character interaction had some element of sadness to it. This is just where things are at this point in the story. Everything's tragic. Everyone's hurting in some way. There's conflict everywhere. No one is feeling good. This is the state of society. This is the war. And this is how things fall out as people try to find their places within the world, within this war, and try to find a way forward to protect the things that they love, to cherish the things that they value. Because when push comes to shove and you come to grips with the idea that the things you value most are now being taken away from you. That's when you do some things that's when you make some decisions and do some things that may not be entirely in character, but you feel like you have no choice. Or maybe it reveals character. Either one. This episode was full of characters who, for one reason or another, find themselves having to make this drastic choice, having to do something that they were previously hesitating a bit with, but now realize they must. When it comes down to the complete wire, what do you value the most, and what will you do to cherish that, to savor that? What will you sacrifice in your wake? This episode was all about those sorts of decisions. There were lots of decisions made by characters. Some of them were a bit more minor, some of them were very major. In particular, I'm thinking about Jace, I'm thinking about Marcus, I'm thinking about Jinx to a certain extent, and most particularly, Victor. Despite the huge amount of fireworks throughout, despite him, I don't think, having the most screen time, maybe, despite all of that, I think that Victor was the star of this episode, in my opinion. It starts with him, and it almost ends with him. It ends with the fight with the firelights. But the lasting impact that this episode has had with me is about Victor. So let's start from the beginning. I mentioned in my preamble that I'm really interested in Victor. He has a high ceiling. He has a potential to rise in my ranks. A great way to do that, give me a backstory for him. Give me context. We had some context, but it was very simplified. All we knew was he was someone from the Undercity who rose the ranks to become a semi-important person in Piltover because he believed in himself. He believed in his dream. He loved science. He loved discovery. He loved tinkering with things and making inventions. He was an intuitive, curious, inquisitive mind. And he believed in his abilities, and that's how he rose. But that's all we knew. Now we see a bit more of him in his childhood, and perhaps how he learned some things. We see that he's very isolated early on. Other kids are playing in the water, playing around, and he is making this little boat invention. That's what he does. That's what he's been doing since he was a kid. Inventing things, trying to discover new ways to express himself through these things, technological advances, all that sort of thing. But it isolated him because he put everything into that. Other children looked at him as weird or just couldn't relate to him. For whatever reason, he was an outsider. Very much so. But on this particular day, specifically a shot of him having looked at the little girl looking at him down from the cliff, and then the way she disappears and he's just by himself, that was very... that shot told me a lot about his childhood. It was very substantial and rich. And then so he continues making this boat, and he sets it off. He sets it loose for it to go in the water. And we have a great little scene where he's chasing this boat, but obviously he's crippled, his leg's injured. So he's stumbling along, trying to catch up to it, trying to watch it all the way, trying to stay at its pace as it goes through this cave. But he can't. He's not quick enough because of his leg. He stumbles. He can't catch up with it. That is so symbolic. It's so metaphorical. It's pretty blunt, but it's so effective. Like, subtlety's great, but you don't need it all the time. The idea here is obviously that boat was indicative and symbolic of his dreams, his ambitions, the things he wants to achieve, the things he wants to invent, the progressions he wants to make, the way he wants to advance the world, the technological world, the way people look at society. That's what the boat represents. And yet, as he tries to keep up with it, he just can't do it. His body gives up on him. His health gives up on him. That's so indicative of his point in the plot right now. He's making these hex-tech innovations. He's exponentially benefiting society in terms of industries and convenience and the way things are run. He's dying. His body's giving up on him. He can't keep up doing these things. He can't achieve the things he wants to achieve. He can't fulfill the dreams he has because his body is just not letting him. He has this disease, the fumes, when he was a child. And so that scene was an amazing indicator of that. His mind and his passion far exceeds the capabilities that his body has. And the super sad take-home point here is that sometimes those with these ambitions, like Heimerdinger said, they just burn too bright. That was a great scene with him and Heimerdinger after, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. We then see that he meets with this other scientist, the one in the employ of Silco, who created Shimmer, it seems like. He created Shimmer. So he was doing all these experiments years ago, 20 years back, or however long this was, 15, 20 years. He was always doing it. He was taking care of this creature, Rio, I think his name was, and he said he was dying, or he said it was dying, this creature, and that he needed to do whatever he could to keep it alive. We later see that that had some dark implications, but what he said was the mutation must survive. And I looked up his name, or I asked someone his name. His name is Singed. I guess maybe they said that before. I didn't register it. So Singed. This gives a lot of substance for him. Before I didn't make much note of him, but I've talked so much about the dual nature of discovery and scientific innovation, and how it's wondrous and it's beautiful and it benefits society, and it's this childish dream for a better world. But how, if taken out of proportion, if taken to the extreme, it can lead to too much too soon. It can lead to something dark. It can spiral out of control. I think that Singed is the best demonstrator of this. He is the dark side of innovation. He said that the mutation must survive. Later on, he is just rendering Rio completely unable to properly live, just for the sake of survival, to continue to experiment on him, I'm guessing. And that's cruel. Rio is clearly not having a good time. He is struggling. At that point, just put him out of his misery, but he is artificially letting him live. And so I'm just going through this backstory. They continue the second half of this backstory in the second half of the episode, but I'll just continue with it. This frightened Victor. This sickened him. It disgusted him. He hated that Rio had to... He had clearly... there had been a little bit of a time skip, so he had clearly made a habit of starting to feed Rio. He had formed a bond with him, and Singed, it seems like. But then he sees what he is doing to him, and he thinks it cruel. The mutation must survive, but at what point is that just too much, you know? Why would you need to go that far for this mutation if it's at the expense of natural life? If it's going too far. And that's the dark side of this. That's the side that Heimerdinger is warning against. Going too far with these innovations, with this magic, this hex tech. I know hex tech isn't the same thing as exactly as what Singed was doing, but it's by far definitely the same concept. So that was really interesting. It substantiated Singed a lot. And this gave a lot of context for who Victor is, the way he thinks. But I'm going to make a bit of a conclusive statement on Victor in just a few minutes, but first I want to go to the scene before the OP with him and Heimerdinger. Very humanistic side to Heimerdinger, very sympathetic. He's sentimental, he's nostalgic. He feels very sorry for Victor, for his predicament. Victor says, "Do you often contemplate death?" For a guy who's lived so long, of course the only death he contemplates is that of his friends. That of Victor's, in this case. Very sobering. Again, that sober tone, present throughout the whole episode. And then we get a bit of internalization for Victor for his situation. Before we had just been getting sort of facial cues and him coughing up blood and looking kind of horrified about that, and his insistence on doing these things quickly. But this is the first time we really, really get his thoughts about this, about the concept of death. "Do you ever contemplate death, Professor?" I might be paraphrasing, but that's what he asked him. And I just told you Heimerdinger's answer. And he's contemplating his death, and he is just filled with regret because he has so many ideas. His mind is brimming with the ways he can make a name for himself. And that's key. That's something that I hadn't really dwelt on as much. But at the end of the day, he can't. His body's giving up on him. He's dying. And Heimerdinger tries to console him with the idea that he is doing great things. He has kickstarted this revolution with Jace. And Victor replies, "Figments. It's just figments. They are the sparks of what he wanted to accomplish. They're just the tip of the iceberg. He had so much more life to live, and he can't do it. He's going to be forgotten. Someone like Jace is going to get all the headlines." And so this really, hammered in the idea that Victor He very much contains the heart of what these innovations mean. Him and Jace both want to help people. But Victor, you see, while Jace had... I'm recontextualizing their dynamic a bit, given the information I got from this episode. Jace always wanted to benefit society. He wanted to share the glory, the wonders of Hextech, of magic with the world because of how much it benefited him. Victor saw the genius in that. He saw the potential in that. And one of the first things he says to him is, "Do you think I want to be an assistant all my life?" That's what he said to him in episode 2. So that speaks of his ambition. He, from the start, has had this notion of making a legacy for himself, of carving his name in history as someone who was an innovator, a genius scientific mind. He's had that from the start, and I knew that. I didn't know it was to this extent until today, until I watched this episode. So, while Jace I don't think he really had much of an idea of making a name for himself as much as the innovations themselves. He is now making a name for himself, despite that not being his goal in the first place. His initial goal was the inventions themselves, the innovations themselves, magic, sharing this with the world, how beneficial this could be. And so this, despite his motivations not being to do with his legacy, he is going down the path of having a gigantic legacy. He's the golden boy. He's the face of this revolution. Sorry, I'm adding another bit in here, but this one was one I couldn't help. Unfortunately, the recording for the next couple of minutes got kind of corrupted. You can't really see that well. It's kind of frozen, and the audio kind of glitched a little bit. This is the only part in the video where I had that problem, luckily, so I'm just going to repeat the things I said. What I'm saying is that, essentially, Victor, in his mind, obviously he had the ambition of benefiting society. So did Jace. They both had their hearts in the right place from the start, and I think that continues to be the case up until episode 6, as much as Jace strays in one direction, and as much as Victor gets a little bit reckless due to his terrible and sympathetic and unfortunate circumstances. Their hearts were always in the right place, and I think they continue to be in the right place, even if some actions from particularly Jace may seem to indicate otherwise. But what I'm trying to say here is that Jace didn't really have much of an idea to have his name up in lights, to have this legacy, to carve a place in history for himself, to, make a mark on history. He primarily just wanted to share this wonder. In episode 2, he talks to Victor about how beautiful magic is, and he just wants the world to see that. Victor, on the other hand, of course, wants to benefit society. That is probably his foremost ambition. Actually, I'm pretty sure that is his foremost ambition, to help the world. He says that in episode 5, the previous episode, about how annoyed he is with Jace for thinking about so many of his policies while they're not spending time benefiting lives, benefiting Piltover. So he definitely cares first and foremost about benefiting the world. But I think right up there with it is his ambition, his desire to go down in history. He doesn't want to just leave figments. He wants to leave this whole image of who he was and the things he contributed to society. He is enamored with the idea of this legacy, it seems like. And this episode really shows it. That puts it in the forefront. There were breadcrumbs before. Like we said in episode 2, how he doesn't want to be an assistant his whole life. This is where it kind of manifests, as we see him talk about how horrifying it is for him to imagine a world where he just gets forgotten, despite what he wanted to do, what he could have done. In this moment where he's contemplating death and talking to Heimerdinger, he doesn't talk about how he won't be able to contribute to benefiting society. He talks about how he won't be able to go down in history. But I do think it says a lot that in this moment, when he's contemplating his death, verbalizing it for the first time to someone, he talks about his legacy, not society. So it's an interesting aspect to Victor. It's an interesting new layer, and I think it makes the tragedy of this whole thing much more powerful. I just find it interesting that the one with the focus on legacy is the one who is suffering from the potential of not having his legacy go down, and the one who doesn't really care about that seems to be going down in history. It's a bit of tragic irony there. Now, of course, that's not to say that this is black and white. I'm not saying that Victor didn't want to benefit society. I've been saying for 6 episodes, Victor does have good intentions. He wants to help people as well. He is not solely psychopathically thinking, all I want is to have my name go down in history, and that's all. He's had this heart from the beginning. And I'm not saying that Jace didn't enjoy this attention he's getting. Of course he's not going to complain about being famous now. Of course not. So there's bits and pieces of each in the other. And so it forces Victor to make a choice. The man he, all that time ago, ran away from in fear of his conviction to not let this mutation die, not let this progression die, no matter what, no matter how dark things got, he goes back to him, to Singed, because he's at a point where he doesn't see any other way. I think that he is trying to survive. He's just trying to find a way to survive, because navigating the avenues that him and Jace have been trying to navigate all this time, they can't solve this mystery. They can't get it to work. He made progressions to a certain point, but you can't, this rapid evolution of organic matter, it always burns out. So he's gone to someone else who's another genius, another person who loves science in that way, but who represents that dark side. And he says something very haunting. He realizes that he was right. He understands what he meant, that the mutation must not die. Victor has so much to contribute to the world, and he is not going to abide just dying when he has so much more to do, when his name won't go down in history. So it's a bit of a darker tinge to Victor's character that I very much like. It's so interesting. That was awesome. But in terms of my feelings towards what's happening to him, I care for Victor, so I'm very uneasy about what this means. I think he's going down a bit of a dark path now, and I worry for him. But I don't worry for his mortality, because I think at the end of the day, he's going to live. Whatever he's going to do here, he's going to end up living, I think. But what will that mean? What will be given up in the process? What will the ramifications be? I don't know. But that was Victor's choice. And now Jace's choice, sociopolitically. He had been abiding by caution. He had been stopping all these Hextech operations. He had been listening to Heimerdinger and being cautious and all of this stuff. But now when faced with the prospect of his friend's death, he's not doing that anymore. There's no more caution. There's no time. He wants to save Victor's life, and he is sick of the red tape. He is just sick of it. This is his brother. This is his brother's life. He respects Heimerdinger as much as anyone, but he is not going to abide by his rules any longer. He offers no solutions that will help Victor's life, so he's going to do it himself. And yet, it's so sad to see what happens to Heimerdinger. This man is somewhat antagonistic to Victor and Jace at this point in time, but he is not a bad person at all. He's deeply intelligent. He seems to know what's good for society, but at the end of the day, people respond to actions, not words. Like Jace said, what are you going to do to fix this? You can't fix these things with speeches and words. He has offered his sympathies to Victor. He has said that he cares for him, that he feels so sorry for him. He has said all the right things to Jace, but when push comes to shove, when someone's life is at stake, you need actions. So you can totally understand where Jace is coming from. He's just sick of it. He's sick. Maybe if Victor's life wasn't at stake, he wouldn't have done this. He would have continued going along this path and being cautious and listening to Heimerdinger. But these drastic situations make you put what you value most at the forefront of your mind. What Jace values most is his friend's life. Heartfelt as always. His motivation situated in compassion, a heartfelt wish, whether it be for a better world to share this wonder with the world, or whether it be for his friend to just live a long life. His motivations have always been very heartfelt, very true, but the way he goes about them, it just gets a bit more and more unsavory, because I got no pleasure from seeing Heimerdinger ousted from the council. Jace has a point. Heimerdinger is a bit short-sighted in some things. He's very broad-sighted in the way he sees society and the long-term ramifications of Hextech. I think that's much as clear. He's not wrong about that this is dangerous, and the story is very much front-loading that idea through Singed and Victor and the tone around them. But he's also short-sighted in the way that he can't see things from the perspective of people who have such short lives in comparison to him. He's not able to see things from their perspective. He's sad about Victor's death, of course he is, but he can't truly relate to their urgency. And so that's the divide there. And so this man who's contributed so much to the progression of Piltover is just ousted unceremoniously. And a beautiful detail is, firstly, actually I'll get to Medarda in a little bit. She has a little bit of a section. in a second. But such a beautiful detail is that Jace, the one who initiated this decision that everyone else was shocked at, is the one who raises his hand to vote for him being put off the council last. It's a unanimous vote, and yet he votes last. It just shows how reluctant he is, how hesitant he is to have to do this. He has he knows it's what has to be done in his opinion, but he hates doing it. And that act, it's such great storytelling through character actions. Him raising his hand last, it just shows his reluctance. He doesn't want to do this. He hates that it's come to this, but he's doing it anyway. And of course, the council, they're all in his pocket after what happened in episode 5, thanks to Medarda's influence, and they have to agree with him. Their hands are pretty much tied. They have their fingers in this Hextech business. They can't refuse. So yeah, great scene there. So now I've finished with Victor, Singed, and Jace, and Heimerdinger. Now to Medarda, the last part of the Piltover politics I think I'm going to talk about here. Well, kind of. This is the most human side to Medarda that we've seen, the most heartfelt side to her. Up until this point, I had reservations about whether she cared about Jace at all. I knew for sure she had ulterior motives somehow, because of her ambitions, because of her family situation. But I didn't know up until the first 5 episodes. I had no idea whether she actually cared for Jace, or whether she was just trying to use him, whether her romantic advances were born of some other motivation that didn't have to do with romance or her feelings for him. I think this episode clearly shows that she does care for him. She was upset that he left her. She was hurt. She wasn't just upset because an asset had gone to someone else and seemed to value someone else more. She was upset because she was hurt. She spent the night with him, she opened herself up to him, and he left her. So of course she's hurt by that, and that isn't an action or a feeling of someone who is purely cold-hearted at all. And I think the scene that the both of them have is wonderful because Jace pours his heart out to her, talks about how much he cares for Victor. She didn't really know that. She didn't know how deep his care for him ran. And she is very sympathetic about it. She's very gentle. She says that he should go to him. He should go to his brother. I thought that was really lovely. And then he leans his head on her lap, kisses her hand. Little actions that show how much he values her. He feels safe with her there. And you could see by her facial animations, her body language, she valued that so much. So yeah, I'm firmly in the Medarda cares for Jace camp now. Perhaps she started not caring for him and purely wanted him for this gain, for this ambition she had. But maybe that's developed into something now. I think the situation is very much both now. This episode just gave so much great insight to Medarda with very subtle, very small scenes, small actions, very efficient characterization. We just have this small scene and we just have her reaction to Jace's proclamation or vote, but it does so much. And she reveals that the specifics of her family situation. She's in exile because she fell short of Medarda's standards. So very much bottom of the rung for her family. We see to the extent of that now. She's totally exiled. And I think now there's an element of wanting to prove them wrong. I think that's a lot of where this comes from. Because of her pride, because she wants to sort of shove it in their face that, she is up to their standards, that they'd be lucky to have her. And how human is that? That's super understandable. In particular, there's a moment where there's this look on her face. It's a look of such yearning, such longing and emotion. Brilliant facial animations and aesthetics there to portray that. It was a great look. That hold on, let me find it. Okay, we got it here. Look at this. This look says so much. It's a longing, a yearning, a sadness, and an emotionality, most of all. This episode did so much for her. And then later in the council meeting, and so this scene also showed so much. Jace, he's decided, right? He's completely decided that as much as he hates to do this, Heimerdinger has to go for his own ambitions, for what he believes is right. And so he says here, this vote has to be unanimous. All in favor, What does he do right here? Immediately looks to Medarda, the person who is his source of comfort, his safe place, the person he feels he can trust the most in this situation. And look at her face. As much as she has been ousting Heimerdinger out and sort of sidelining him for her own ambitions, it seems like, and for Jace to take the forefront, she feels awful about this. She is very hesitant. She didn't imagine that Jace would take things this far due to Victor's death. And so she's so surprised and hesitant and sad about this, I think. Maybe there's an element of her thinking, what is this monster I've created almost? This episode was so good for Medarda. I mentioned my top 5 before, and although the order of that top 5 has changed after this episode, I think, the members of that top 5 are still the same. Medarda, I think, is probably 6th. This episode was so good for her. But yeah, this whole Piltover situation, so sad to see that things have come to this ultimatum. Jace has to make this choice to completely just get rid of Heimerdinger. Victor has to make this choice to reject caution and embrace this dark side of science because he has nothing left. And then Heimerdinger has to make the choice that stimulated Jace's choice by not allowing them to continue with this Hextech stuff. He's just like, okay, things have gotten to a point. I can literally see the things that caused destruction in the past in your Hextech research. That's enough. We're done. And that must have been tough for him because he knows they're not bad people making these discoveries, doing these things. But it's just gone too far. So that's another big decision that was made, leading to different dominoes. Then we come to Marcus. More good material for him in this episode. As we see Silco just cruelly threatening him with his daughter. That was awful. What a heinous thing to do. But I'll get to Silco in a bit. And so because of all the stuff that's going on, Marcus just his hands are tied. His daughter's life is at stake. What else is he going to do? So he ultimately gives in, decides to tell Jace that the Firelights are responsible for all the things that Jinx was doing, that Silco's gang were doing, and all that. And ultimately, Jace gives the order that to get a hold of all these problems with the smuggling, problems with the economics that are going on, trade disputes, all these problems, he has to put an iron grip on the city. So he tells Marcus to supervise that, to be the head of that. And we see Marcus gearing up and doing all that at, I think, like the bridges, the borders of the city. It seems to be this bridge. Also, that would make sense because I think that's where the war occurred that we saw at the beginning of episode 1. So that's what Marcus is up to. Just more of the same for him. Good work, lots of conflict. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place. I think things are going to come to a head with him soon because he's literally... He has no other choice, and he's gearing up for this. It seemed to be foreshadowing to him taking some sort of stand, maybe fighting against the Firelights, maybe fighting against someone else, I don't know. Then we have Silco, who is at his most cruel and menacing. I talked in the beginning, before the reaction, about how there are all these more lighter layers. Of course, they're not good layers or anything. He's not a good guy in any sense of the word, but... layers of care, layers of compassion towards Jinx primarily. All of that sort of thing. The root of why he's so hurt and why he's taking these stances that he's now taking. Those are lighter sides to him that may give people fuel for sympathizing with his position and the way he thinks and all of that. But he is still very much a villain. The darkest character in this series, I think. This episode showed why. Literally threatening Marcus's daughter, very overtly doing it, not leaving any ambiguity at all. Terrible thing to do. And then similarly terrible when he's in Zaun, when he confronts Caitlyn and Vi, who I'll talk about in a bit, literally feeding Shimmer to these Shimmer addicts. Horrible things that he did in this episode. Nailing home his position that, we might have seen some other sides to him before, but Silco is still Silco. He's always been this dark person. The things that have happened in his life have caused him to become this dark enforcer of Zaun. He is a menacing, awful person in many ways, and this illustrated it. And he completely lost it when they escaped. He was very annoyed. The reason he threatened Marcus in the first place is because he was annoyed that Violet had come loose. She had escaped from prison, and he was worried, I think, that she was going to make contact with Jinx, possibly turn her away from him. I think that is the root of where a lot of this menace comes from. He values Jinx so much. Like he said, she's greater than he ever imagined. I think she's nearly as valuable to him as his cause. She is, I think, the second most important thing in his life right now. He is so invested in her, and his genuine care. It's very genuine, but it causes him to do these awful things because he doesn't want Vi to take her away from him. He doesn't want Powder to come back because Powder had been peeking through. Just forget about Vi. Vi's gone. You are Jinx, and you are this beautiful person to him. So I think it's interesting that the root of a lot of this is his fear of loss, his fear of losing Jinx, I think. That's the way I interpret it. Maybe you interpret it differently, but that's what I got. And then so with Jinx, she learns about all these things happening with people chasing these two girls, and then begins to go along in that direction. She questions that guy Chuck. She questions Savika. She learns that Vi is now a part of this whole thing, this whole conflict, and she's very upset about all of this. So she goes out and finds her. As soon as she learns from Savika that her sister is out there, that's it, that is the one thing on her mind. She goes out to find her. As much as that beautifully written and beautifully presented baptism that Silco gave Jinx at the end of episode 5 was, as much as he wanted to kill Powder, as much as he wanted Jinx to leave Powder behind, that was her whole childhood. That is a deeply rooted part of her that she can't just cast off. And so Powder was rising to the surface. Powder was breaking through here as she looked for her sister. And so I'll get back to Jinx a little bit. I'll catch up with that as we get to the climax. To talk a little bit about Violet and Caitlin, I find it interesting. Again, their relationship is very, very good. I like their dynamic a lot. This is a bit more emotional than the sort of witty banter and sort of sexual tension they had in the last episode, though there was a moment that didn't escape me. You might have seen that in the reaction. But a lot more to do with how deeply rooted Vi's hatred of enforcers are because of all they've done to take all this stuff away from her. She, as much as she seems to see that Caitlin is a good person, she is a sweet person, as she said in the last episode. She likes Caitlin. But it's not easy to cast off the impression she has after all the enforcers have done to destroy her life. And I think Caitlin understands that too. She's very open-minded. She doesn't take that in a super bad way, and I think she gets it, which is very nice to see. She doesn't take that personally because she sees that's, the horror she must have lived through. And it was just so haunting to see all these memories of Powder as Vi is drifting in and out of delirium, seeing all these things in this building that they grew up in, that they spent all this time in. And so I think it's great that Caitlin accepts all of that. It was so sobering to see, again, theme of the episode, tone of the episode, to see all these addicts, these people who have just become so addicted to Shimmer that they've lost everything. They've mutated. They're living in the dark, skittering around, living like animals. It's so sad to see. One little detail I want to add to this discussion is that back in episode 2, when I first saw the effects that Shimmer had on other people and its surroundings, I looked at the way that it branched out in that sort of fungal way, as I talked about, and I discussed how that may be indicative of something, the way it seems to infect its surroundings and poison them to an extent, how that may be foreshadowing something or metaphorical of something. I think in this episode, episode 6, we see what that was foreshadowing. We see the knock-on trickle effects that this Shimmer has had on all of Zon society, how it has led to so many people being addicted to it, so many people losing their lives, losing their sense of self, being ashamed of what they become, becoming mutated, becoming hooked on it. It's just infected the inner reaches of Zon. I think the way it manifested in those early episodes may have been a hint of that. So I just thought I'd mention that because it sort of comes to fruition in this episode. And again, indirectly, this is an example of the horrible negative, the horrible negatives, the evil things that Silco has done. He has caused so much disrepair, so much poverty and lack of proper living conditions in Zon. He stands up for what is right and wants to leads on into this new age of prosperity and opportunity. But look at what he's doing to a huge portion of it. All these people that become addicted to Shimmer, that he can't support all of them. And so what happens to the ones that are forgotten and tossed aside? They become like this, these shells of living beings. And a perfect example, a perfect character to use for this is the traitor. I don't remember his name. From episode 1. Full of life, full of personality, a little shifty, a little awkward in episode 1, becoming this shell, this husk of a human being, not wanting anyone to see him, not wanting Vi to see him as what he is now. It inspires a lot of sympathy and makes you see the trickling negative side effects of what Silco's doing. You can see a lot of people that are empowered by this, and you can see where he's coming from. But look at what else is happening. It's just awful. And so they have that confrontation, Silco, Vi and Caitlin escape, and then this beautiful integrated scene as Jinx holds up the sparkler or the signal flare that Vi gave her. Hold this up, and wherever you are, I'll come find you. That hit pretty deeply when I saw that. At this point, all that's on Jinx's mind is finding her sister. The music is building up, and it just completely reaches a crescendo as Jinx is holding up that thing. The minute that happens, as we see Marcus gearing up, we see Silco, we see Vi and Caitlin escaping, we see all this stuff happening, beautifully edited together. It flows seamlessly, and then it crescendos with her holding up the music booming. The minute that happened, it hit me deeply. You can probably see that in the reaction. But what really made me emotional was when you turn around, the camera pans, it swivels, and you see behind her Milo and Claggor, the ghosts of them, screaming. I really lost it at that point. I started tearing up. For the first time in the series, it really hit me. That was a lot, because she's been living with those voices, particularly Milo's, but Claggor's too. And at this point, she hears them screaming in pain. That's all she can hear. And I think it's just so overwhelming for her. It's so hard to deal with these things. She wants to reach out she wants Vi. She wants her. She feels like home. As much as she seems to love Silco, Vi is home. And you can also interpret Milo and Claggor there as screaming for her to do that. In their deepest heart of hearts, would they really have wanted her and Vi to be separate? No, I don't think so. What a cathartic, dramatic, emotional moment there. It hit me so hard. I'm sure you can see in the reaction. And Vi sees it. Vi comes to her. They hug. And that's where we see Powder. Pure Powder for the first time. I changed. My circumstances changed. I become unrecognizable. And Violet affirms that. You did what you had to do to survive. What a beautiful sentiment. Supporting her sister so much. Validating what she had to do. In this world, you have to do some crazy things to survive. And so that doesn't matter to her. All that matters is that they're together. And she feels so bad for what she's done. What she did to drive her away. But then Caitlin comes and everything breaks apart. Distrust. The ghosts start whispering these horrible things to Jinx, telling her to not trust what's going on, having her spiral. And that's where Powder, who had risen to the surface, withdraws again, and Jinx comes out. She had come so close. She had hugged her. She had teared up. She had cried into Vi's shoulders, into her arms. But then she has to go away from that. And the Jinx that Silco had tried to promote, to facilitate, and perpetuate, she is who rises to the surface here, but not in the way that Silco wants for her, because she is still inflicted by this trauma. Nothing has changed that. And then we see someone looking down from above. We see just like a pair of legs, maybe a gun or something, watching all of this. And I'm wondering, the firelights come in, and I'm wondering, what are they actually doing here? Because this isn't some huge smuggling dispute where something's going down, where you could get some contacts that would tell you a trade's going down, let's disrupt the import of Shimmer, the transport of Shimmer, these deals, whatever. Let's disrupt the enforcers. Let's disrupt Silco. None of that's happening here. It's just a meeting between two sisters. So it seems like they were keeping an eye on Jinx. There was a lot of focus on the main leader here. The main leader. And so I started wondering, it's pretty obvious. I'm sure most of you guys got who it was, maybe earlier than I did. But there are a lot of clues leading to this. They fight. They're fighting with both of them. I don't think Vi was the target, but Vi fought back because she's helping with Jinx, Caitlyn, and all that. There's a beautiful panning shot, swiveling shot, of Vi and Jinx fighting off these firelights. And even though the context itself is not so wholesome, I think it was a beautiful shot to see them together again, grown up and fighting off their enemies. Although I don't think the firelights are really that bad. I don't think the firelights have evil intentions. I think they're anarchists, well-intentioned anarchists, given what we saw in episode 4. Caitlyn's knocked out. They take the gem, the stone, that Jinx had been working to resolve. I find it funny that she's like, "You're trying to take this stone from me to Vi," and Vi's going, "What the hell is that? What do you even mean? I have no idea what the hell that is." I found that kind of funny. They knock out Caitlyn. They knock out Vi. They take the gem, and as it seems they're about to kill Vi, like to strike her, the leader says, "No, take her in. Leave her alive." Now that could just be to question her for whatever reason. I think there's something more personal here. This leader was keeping tabs on Jinx. There was a lot of focus on this leader in terms of just the direction, the visuals, zooming in on him, zooming in on his words. He had a vested interest in Jinx, and he kept Vi alive. So what I'm guessing is that this is Echo. I think it has to be Echo. Now, I'm going to get more into, if this is confirmed to be Echo, I'm going to get more into what that means and the trajectory of his character up until this point when it's properly revealed. But that does explain quite a lot and substantiate quite a lot about Echo, even though he wasn't being used a hell of a lot up until this point in the first act. We haven't seen him at all in Act 2, technically. I think there are little indicators that could have led to him becoming, later on, 5 years later or whatever, the leader of this anarchist group that doesn't agree with Silco. Why would he when he killed Benzo, this person he very much loved, and Vander, and Milo and Clagger? He's a huge reason for the cause behind that happening. So why would he side with Silco? Of course he'd want to go against him. Of course he'd be a faction from the Undercity that nevertheless opposed the primary faction from the Undercity, that being Silco. Of course, he doesn't side with the Enforcers either. So that I think it would make sense for him to be the head of this third party, these Firelights. Him telling them, okay, let's take Violet in, that I think that sealed it for me. But they're very much opposed to Jinx. In episode 4, they were like, it's her, and they were attacking her, and they had no reservations for combating Jinx. Neither did they in this episode either. So I think they see how scary she is, and very much view her in opposition. Maybe Echo, there's some element of Echo trying to get through to her, but I think by now they just realize that she's an enemy. So it'll be interesting to see how Echo sort of reacts to that. I don't really know how he feels about Jinx, but I think what's clear is that he sees that she's opposed. She's in opposition to him. She's very fearsome at this point, and that she's far gone. Maybe he's trying to get through to her, or maybe he's lost hope. I don't know. Then again, that's if I'm right, and that is Echo. I'm 98% sure that it is Echo, because he's the only character who's left who hasn't been revealed post-time skip, and there was a ton of interest, a ton of focus on the leader of the Firelights, and him being the leader of the Firelights would make a lot of sense contextually for his character, but not confirmed yet, so we'll wait and see. And so after this super long discussion again, I think that's about all I gotta say. Amazing episode. This show just goes from strength to strength. 3 left. Can't wait to see where it goes. Yeah, that's all I gotta say. Thanks very much for watching.